Hello and welcome to the Proptech Hot Seat on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we explore the trends and technologies driving innovation across the built environment. This show is brought to you in partnership with Proptech Ireland, the hub for innovators, investors and for industry leaders. In the Proptech Hot Seat today, I'm delighted to be joined by Deep Chakraborty. Deep, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I know you're joining us from your back garden in California. We like to keep it casual here on the show. That's a new level of casual. Delighted you could join us today.
Thank you for having me, Carol, and it's an honor to be on your show.
I'm delighted. So, you're the CEO of Enact Systems. You might just talk to our audience about Enact Systems, what the offering is.
Yes, Enact's platform is offering end-to-end software for solar project design and solar project management. It's a platform that was launched in the US in 2015, and we have grown now globally in many countries. We have two sets of customers. On the one hand, we have, of course, homeowners and business owners, people who buy solar and install them on their homes and buildings and own them for years. We're making it really easy for them to own these assets, understand the financial returns, of course, and the value. But we also offer providers. So think of solar installers and solar developers. We're offering them really good tools to design these systems remotely. So we use proprietary imaging algorithms with layout and design and pricing. So it's very easy now to design right and, of course, sell them right. And, of course, we then measure them right. So it's a complete end-to-end solar process lifecycle.
Very good. They're two very different customer bases you have there. So let's split them up. We'll talk about the consumers first, because I think, you straight away nailed probably the most important point, and that is consumers really need to understand their return. They need to understand the value. So you might just talk us through the offering for private consumers and homeowners.
Absolutely. It's very simple. It's been 15 years for me in solar. And we all know solar works. It's a huge revolution, but there wasn't simple apps yet that help a customer understand how much money did they save. The whole point of solar, of course, is clean energy and sustainability, but people buy it for savings and payback as well. And we were on this journey now to offer this, and it's now launched in the US and now across the world, where the customer can see on one screen a very simple chart of how much money are they saving daily, monthly, annually, which of course is a result of many factors. It's a good solar generation. It's of course the weather, the performance of the hardware, and many other attributes. Electric rates have a huge impact. The rates are rising everywhere, so that sometimes helps you save more. It's a complex answer, but we have simplified it for the owner. And since we launched it, our customers have asked us for more. So we offer them system health reports and how well is the system performing. If everything is not going well, we offer them warnings and also help them on getting them fixed. And finally, battery storage is a big piece of the equation. So we help them understand the battery charge and discharge and their impact on their savings, battery health, and financial ROI. So it's a complete all-in-one simple app. It's of course a web app. It's quite a lot of information. We also have a native app you can download on the App Store, iOS and Google.
So are you essentially hardware agnostic? Are you, your application will work across any hardware?
Absolutely.
Any supplier of hardware?
That's right. So we're agnostic to the brand of the solar panels, inverters or batteries. To make all of this work, we had to integrate with all the major OEMs or equipment manufacturers. And that was difficult, took us years. But having done that now, we're really adding value to all these owners. So we're actually helping all OEMs improve their customer engagement as a layer of data and app.
Very good. I'm glad you touched on performance of hardware, because I think in the conversation around solar, a lot of this has been driven by environmental concerns, obviously, cost savings, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Rates are, have been going up certainly over the last year, while we're starting to see some of that become more manageable now. It has been a really difficult kind of 18-month period for that. But in terms of the performance of hardware, I think that we are now coming to a conversation where that, certainly I've heard people in the industry when, making choices in their own homes, this is where they're coming to evaluate the performance of hardware. And there is a huge difference. And I think that's something maybe the consumer market isn't aware of, that actually it's a sliding scale. So you might just talk to us about the performance of hardware. How big a difference is there? And in terms of return on investment for the average homeowner, what's the year timeline looking like?
Yeah, let me talk about where I live in California. It's one of the largest solar markets in the country, and we have, millions of customers. The hardware is not just one thing. When you buy solar, it's coming together as a system at your home, the panels, the inverters, and many other components, and now the battery. So what we find is that, the solar panel industry has come a long way. The failure rates on solar panels are down to parts per million, which is very rare that something would happen. But that's not necessarily the case with solar inverters or batteries. And as a customer, just one of those three main components have to fail for you to have a bad experience or outcome. So this is the next wave in our industry. We don't have really good platforms for understanding solar performance or managing the outcomes. Traditionally, the industry has been, of course, hardware centric, and every hardware producer has their own app that talks about their own piece, like the inverter or the battery. But it's the customer's system, which is beyond just that one piece. It also is about the electric rates and, of course, the weather, the grid. The grid fails. I mean, last night, a neighboring city had no power. That has an impact too on your system. And sometimes the batteries trip, you have to restart them. So it's a very complex answer to your question of what is performance and how do you measure it. I think we are on the first cycles of having a system-based monitoring approach and measuring it live and helping the consumer with very basic but intelligent information, not confusing them with a lot of engineering terms because they're not engineers. Now we have mainstream buyers who want to know, is it on? Is it working? Am I saving money, or should I do something about it?
Okay. Well, look, I do want to talk a little bit more about the performance of hardware, but maybe in different parts of the country. But I am particularly interested in the second group of your customer base, and they are the developers. But we can't look at that without kind of acknowledging, as a company, you're operating in the US and 23 other countries, including Ireland. Obviously, the climate of Ireland and the weather patterns of Ireland would be very different to that of California. So you might just talk to us a little bit about maybe your work in Ireland, the UK, and how, I suppose, what developers might need to expect there.
Yes. So the platform that we have offered now for over 5 or 7 years in different parts of the world, it's the same software for all the countries, but we adapt it for every local market. And what's adapted is, of course, the local currency, the electric rates, which are different in every city or town, and some other attributes. For example, how do you finance a project? You have different lenders in some countries versus others. So on Enact, you can start with a building, a simple address in Ireland, and within 5 minutes, the developer can have a proposal which is accurate enough to sign a contract with a homeowner or a building owner on how much solar they should put on the roof or which brand and how should it be priced. So it obviously means the software has a lot of built-in features which help the developers save a lot of time in their sales process. We find that, the conversion from proposal to meetings to closings is very, very low. You need to therefore have an engine that can have very accurate proposals at higher volumes than they normally do, so that you have stronger pipelines. Now, of course, they have to be really accurate, because once you do show up and close the contract, it has to be exactly what you told them up front. And that's the challenge we have solved. And that's why we are one of the fastest growing platforms for solar sales across the world. I will also add that, there are different types of developers. You have big and small, and the teams that do best with Enact are the companies that are growing. They have, let's say, another 10, 15, 20 salespeople being added every year. And as they scale, they realize that their startup tools and documents and, the initial energy cannot be scalable unless they have a system in place for tracking their projects and outcomes. So we are most successful with what we call the small and medium installer segment, which in the US we have thousands of companies. We have similar companies in Europe.
And can you talk to me about your Irish project? Are you in a position to discuss that today?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same profile. The company we work with in Ireland has small and medium project focus. They do residential and commercial buildings. They've been around for several years, and they have been selling and installing systems, and they were looking for this similar, exactly what we offer platform. So we didn't have a hard time. I mean, they came to us, and within 3 weeks, they were up and running with Enact, and they have been really successful with proposals, contracts, on Enact. Remember, none of us live in Ireland or have recently visited, but we are successful in doing it remotely, and it's really helping them.
And what difference does that make for the developers, consumers?
So the first benefit is time to proposal. So if you're a developer, this company, the time it takes for them to respond to a customer proposal has come down like 10 times. Earlier, they would wait 2 or 3 days. Now it's the same day, sometimes same hour. They have a very good offer. Second is the engagement is better because it's a very complete, transparent offer on how much they'll save, cash flows, financials. It generally stirs more engagement. Consumers want to have engagement with providers that have given them more information in a clean manner, and that helps them close deals faster. So those are the 2-3 areas we're seeing good conversion. Same in the US.
Okay, and you might just, if we can, I'm interested. I'm curious about the Enact business model. So who is paying for your service, and is it different across the different client types?
Yes, of course. So the installers and developers are paying for the software, the subscription online. They can sign up and pay for per month per user, and we have discounts based on how many users are using the platform. And larger companies, of course, have more users. They have a better price sometimes, but in general, it's a very standard SaaS subscription model. And the same is true for homeowners and businesses who are using the app. They're also paying as a SaaS subscriber for the software of solar and solar batteries. And so it's not, it's very familiar to you for software companies. We're not trying to sell any hardware here. We're not trying to finance anything. It's just a software data services revenue.
Okay. I had mentioned during the interview that I'm particularly interested to talk about the forms of hardware, but that hardware does actually include batteries and battery storage, which you've referred to already today. But you might just, because we know that that's an area that requires so much more innovation. What does the future look like for solar storage solutions? And what are the trends that we need to be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Obviously, there are 3 big trends we see. First is the grid itself, where I live in many parts of the world, is no longer as reliable as it used to be because of weather, as infrastructure. And so batteries are being paired to add backup capabilities, and 20 to 30% of homes do that in the US. If you go to other parts of the world, it's much higher sometimes. Second big trend is the growth of electric cars. So people who are buying electric cars and need to charge them at home realize quickly that even though they might have solar, the net metering benefits are going away, and they might need to store their solar power on a battery to charge at the evening rates, which are always higher. And that's a trend in many European countries. And so solar buyers are charging with their battery. And of course, there's a lot of advancements coming. Third big trend is the whole area of growth in financing for such systems. So in the US, you can get a solar battery combined system financed as a monthly payment. So it's becoming an alternative to a utility, and even schemes around discharging these systems for benefits like dollars in your bank on a hot summer day, because the grid needs a demand response event. So there's a lot of financial incentives for such systems, which is the third big driver. So that's a quick answer to your question of why solar and storage is so important. It's more complex but fast growing.
Just from what you're telling me there, it's making me question, is the ecosystem supporting this more advanced in perhaps other countries than it might be in Ireland? And obviously, because you're operating globally, like you probably have oversight, and you can probably hazard a bit of a better guess than I might be able to estimate. But, in terms of where we are in Ireland towards domestic consumers embracing solar, have you any measurement of where Ireland sits in a global ranking?
It's definitely not in the top 10. However, I would say this: in the last 2 years, because of the change in Europe on the gas prices and all the energy situation due to the war, we saw a huge spike in the rates, which led to a rapid increase in the growth of customers looking for solar and storage, just like the UK market. And it has changed the rankings completely. And I think I would just say this, instead of losing ourselves in numbers, the annual sales of batteries in the UK, Ireland, let's say the whole region, is far more than the US. And it's growing at a very rapid rate. Same is true for Germany. You have more German battery consumers annually than the US. The US is an early market. That being said, there are many more manufacturers now. I was at the conference this summer in Munich, and we saw at least 100 battery companies launch, and even a bigger number in the pipeline. So lots of new capacity, new brands, some known, some unknown. So it's a very fast growing space.
Obviously, this whole area has changed a lot since Enact Systems was first established back in 2015. Even though it's a relatively short period of time, a huge amount has happened in terms of regulations. So there's compliance as a driving factor that maybe wasn't there before. Previously the conversation might have been solely around sustainability, where you were asking people to make a moral choice or to follow their conscience, whereas actually now we have compliance that obviously has been a key driver for the built environment. What kind of trends are you seeing? Like, what do you see as the next big driver, or where are the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, compliance alone is a huge topic. It's early days, and unlike some other countries, I think every market has its own thing. In the US, the whole regulation is around permitting. So every city has to sign off on every system and inspect every system. It's extremely slow, and months of time are lost in such paperwork. If you go to Germany, there is no permitting bottlenecks, and that really speeds up some of the processes, and systems are also lower priced in terms of dollars for a consumer. But that's just one area of compliance. There's a lot more to come in the area of sales and finance. I feel that in the US, we are seeing very expensive loans being sold with unreasonably high dealer costs. So basically marked up loans, because there's no regulation in this space, and it's a consumer lending problem. In other countries, we haven't even seen the start of such loans. So I see that, it's an emergence of a whole new industry altogether.
That's interesting. So say for a country maybe that is not in the top 10, what can our policymakers learn? Maybe, again, we have an adage here that seems to come up more often than I'd like, and that is that we don't have to make all the mistakes ourselves. We can actually learn from some of the others. So what can our policymakers learn from the experiences of jurisdictions that are maybe a little more advanced?
Yeah, one is keep permitting simple. It's a safe enough investment. It's been around for 20 years or 30 years. Keep it easy. Of course, regulations have to be on the OEMs to make them safe, but let's not encumber the homeowner or the contractors for too many pieces of paper to get each system done, because that's really hurting the consumer's wallet. The other big thing I would say is make it easy for scale up of financing of such systems with government-backed lower interest loans or simple structures. Let's not try to make it burdensome again on the consumer. Obviously, it's a new area, and on the one hand, tax-based incentives are great because it forces the easy tracking and reimbursements. On the other hand, also we need probably incentives from the top, federal government in this case, in your country to make it easy for consumers to avail of such a system quickly.
Very good.
Online. Yeah.
Very good. So I mean that's the policy side, but I'm always curious about the pockets, or the pockets for potential innovation that any evolving ecosystem creates. So obviously you have a good view of kind of the global ecosystem, but looking maybe not necessarily at the Irish, but certainly at the European market. Where are the pockets for potential innovation here? I know you mentioned certainly around the financing side of it, but say for other entrepreneurs in the solar or PropTech industry, if they're looking to add value via renewables, are you seeing any kind of pockets for potential innovation right now?
That's a huge area of innovation ahead of us. In the US, we're seeing obviously ecosystems of startups being set up in different accelerator groups active in different cities. The innovation is not just in the area of hardware or maybe in the area of customer acquisition, which are like challenging problems to solve. We're also now seeing innovation in the area of data, how to leverage data around us to improve access to customers or improve the health of existing solar customers or battery customers. There's a lot of ways to innovate. So new business models is where I see a lot of opportunity. In Europe, in some ways, it is easier. And I'll say, for example, carbon is a big topic. Carbon credits can be sold in Europe and transacted easily, much more easily than the US, where carbon policy is behind. So just that area alone, I can sense as a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to help monetize these carbon assets at the lowest level of a home. It's not been done yet, and huge opportunity ahead for aggregation of carbon benefits at the solar homeowner level.
That's an interesting one. And I touched on just how different not just the marketplace, but how different the world is in 2023 rather than in 2015, in the early days of Enact Systems. Today, what would you do differently?
If I were going back in time, we would have raised more money and pushed the gas pedal harder. It was difficult in the early days because there was no clear policy in the US. We had a couple of backpedaling years of policy, which really hurt us. But the world moved faster, and now I think the US has caught up in many ways to the growth rates. So yeah, if we look back, we would have probably pushed the company harder in those early years and grown faster. But that also allowed us to build the product very well. We focused very hard on the software and made it work in many countries at once, and that's giving us the advantage now.
Okay, and what's in the future for Enact Systems, maybe over the next kind of 2 to 3 years?
Yes, we are laser focused on the US market expansion. We are very West Coast centric today, and we're expanding on the East Coast. And we also have some very good customers in Europe, and I visit regularly. We're seeing fantastic market opportunity in Europe. So to us, both the sides of the Atlantic are very important for our future. Our Series A investor is from the UK. That gives us a very good base to expand from. And we're also looking at expansion in the Middle East, where we have been active for 4 years now. It's one of our biggest markets. So all in all, it's very international growth ahead, but the same product, new features, and helping the same type of customers, the solar companies, developers, and the consumers. It's the same landscape everywhere.
Very good. Amazing progress made globally in just 8 years. And I'm delighted to hear that there is a focus on both sides of the Atlantic and that you visit regularly. And of course, when you make it to Ireland next, we look forward to learning a little bit more, maybe hearing a little bit more about your Irish project and see what's coming out of that. Because again, I suspect we have a catch-up game of our own to do. So I look forward to seeing how that progresses. Thank you so much for your time today. That was Deep Chakraborty and of Enact Systems. And that's all we've time for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out all of the other real estate and construction shows on iPropertyRadio. Before we go, just a special word of thanks to our sponsor, Proptech Ireland, the hub for innovators, investors, and indeed for industry leaders. And again, thank you to Proptech Ireland for making these conversations possible. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Proptech Hot Seat here on iPropertyRadio.